You're watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all of America City.
Good evening, and welcome to the City of Aurora's 26th Annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration. I'm Veronica White, Chair of the Aurora Human Relations Commission. Did you know that the City of Aurora is the only city in the state having continuous week-long activities commemorating the legacy of Dr. King? We are. This is an honored recognition of a city who embraces diversity, and a salute to the committee members who volunteered many hours under the leadership and direction of Dr. Barbara Shannon Bannister and the Community Relations Division in continuing many of these activities. Tonight's forum will focus on the civil rights stories. We all have a story to tell. The civil rights stories are about capturing and preserving oral history. The events of the civil rights movements during the 1950s and the 1960s were a catalyst for worldwide political change, and those who lived through the times have a story to tell. However, the fight for civil rights did not end there. There are stories that have been told and still need to be told about individuals or groups who continue to stand alone, who stand up for justice, and who at times have tackled the unbearable battle of racism, segregation, discrimination, inequity, or injustice. Tonight's presentation of the Civil Rights Stories is one in 6 series. In partnership with the Aurora Human Relations Commission, the NAACP Aurora Unit, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Colorado Holiday Commission, A-Star Photography, and Covenant Technology, previous tapings and tonight's tape will ultimately be turned into a stage production. One of Dr. King's quotes on equal rights, "A right delayed is a right denied," can be viewed as one of the fuels which started the civil rights stories. Willing to share their stories this evening, we have Monique Flemings, to my right, my far right, intake specialist with Goodwill Industries of Denver, Mr. Kojo Hilaire, CNA, community member, and new dad, and Professor Segala, professor of Chicana and Chicano Studies at Metropolitan State College of Denver. Thank you all for joining us this evening and taking time out of your busy schedules to share your story.
Thank you.
We'll begin with Ms. Monique Flemings.
Hi, Veronica.
Hi, Monique.
I would say my story really centers around my children's education.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself at the, I would say, forefront of a difficult situation with one of the school districts locally,
mm-hmm.
and in regards to school turnaround.
Okay.
And I found myself advocating for my child and the children at the school that was being turned around due to the fact that no one seems to give consideration to the impact that turnaround has on the educational process for
mm-hmm.
our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately a delay in learning, and therefore also significant questionable test results on state testing. And you know, it really hurt my feelings to say that this district really did not, I don't feel that they actually embraced the parents that were advocating for the kids at this school. You know, this situation, the school was turned around, the principal was fired in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And this principal actually raised a great deal of funds for this school that had never had that happen before. And with his firing, came on board at an educational management organization, as they put it. And to this day, that school is still struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I subsequently pulled my child out of the school. And but she did definitely show some gaps in her academics, and I believe that it was a direct result of the entire interruption of this school turnaround. The school was told in November that it was not going to be turned around, that they were actually going to spare the teachers and the principal at the time. April came around and they fired pretty much 50% of the staff. And this staff had been there and dedicated to this school since the school had opened, probably 6 years prior to this. Now, in the 6 years, this school has had probably 5 principals. 5 principals.
Since that time.
Yeah, yeah. And to boot, you know, they lost a great deal of kids in that community. A lot of children moved to you know, schools that are outside of their district, outside of their neighborhood. And you know, what a hardship on those parents. You know, I actually drive my child now to school because of that, because I'm not trusting of the neighborhood schools. So I feel like there's an injustice in regards to the academics and the educational system. And there's a lot of politics that happen that do not have anything to do with our children and their learning. You know, and I feel like there's also an opportunity for us to advocate for our kids. You know, I don't feel like there's enough parents that actually are empowered with the idea of advocating for their kids, for their children.
Say empowered and responsibility.
And,
there's
right.
a responsibility.
Exactly.
You used the word, not empowered, inequity. No, you didn't use inequity, but I was going to say inequity, injustice, but also inequity in education.
In education, it is. There's a huge inequality in education because these schools, we actually had the opportunity to view Waiting for Superman, the movie. And I'll tell you this, I left that movie with my jaw on the floor simply because at the end of the day, they do roll tenured teachers who are burnt out, tired, are over the school system together. They actually roll those teachers into low performing schools. Well, if my child is in that low performing school, then you're essentially setting my child up. Is that not the case? And in my opinion, and then you expect our children to perform to a particular level on standardized testing when you already know they're not going to meet it because you've given us substandard educators.
Let me ask of you, because I kind of know a little bit about that story and a little bit about you, but what tip in that type of situation when there's inequity in education, when there's an injustice in education, when there's lack of power for empowerment for a parent, what tip would you give our audience or our guest? What would you do to maybe stand up a little bit and kind of move that injustice to the side, or kind of move it, away, so that your child can get a little bit of equity in the education system?
I would say the best thing I did was stand up for my daughter, and today she advocates for herself.
Okay.
She makes sure she understands that it's her responsibility to make sure she gets what she needs out of those teachers, and then I back her up. I am her protector in that.
It was still in a phrase from the professor before we went on. Each one teach one.
That's
each
right.
one reach one.
Each one.
That's right.
That was perfect.
That's
that was perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Monique.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kojo, we'd like to hear your story. Would you please share?
My story is a little different. I have more to deal with being discriminated over gender. I currently hold my CNA license, and once I finished school and was actually on the job hunt, I realized that being a male CNA is a lot harder than it looks. Like, I ran into roadblocks left and right. One of the companies that I actually went with, said, hey, yeah, we'd like to hire you on. I went through the whole hiring process and an interview just to later on be called back and say, hey, I'm sorry, but it's going to be too hard to place a male in an in-home facility, so we just don't need you right now. So I've been running into problems like that, like left and right, because I've also had another company where I actually went and I was working for a good amount of time, a few months, and it turned out the clients that I had, which was the majority of my hours, actually wanted to drop me because they didn't feel comfortable with a male. And it's just kind of hard.
Were they female?
Yeah, they were
Okay.
female. It was two older ladies who were female, and I understand, you know, not feeling comfortable with a male, but I was professionally trained to do this job. You know, I don't look at it as being, you know, as an open door for me to just go in there and, you know, hurt people or anything like that. I do it, you know, with compassion. I care about people, so that's the reason why I wanted to get in this job. But I feel like I'm being halted from that because I'm only being offered, you know, certain clients. Other male clients, you know, I don't really get I feel I don't get to really expand on my skills or deliver what I've been taught. And it's just kind of hard and frustrating. It kind of puts me, like, it makes me discouraged to even go out and fill out applications, because you keep filling out application after application just to, you know, have the same roadblock over and over again. And it just kind of puts me back. And I don't know exactly what it is that I need to do to change this or how I would actually address the situation. But I do feel that it's something that the attention needs to be brought upon, because there's a lot of people who actually go to school to be a CNA, and it seems like it's only being open for females.
Help me understand something, because CNA, I know what a CNA is, Certified Nursing Assistant. So you're working in a facility versus a personal care facility or personal care person where you're in the home. Someone in the home can ask for whomever they want.
Yes.
But you're talking about being in a facility where that service is for everyone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the positions that I was more of a personal care provider.
Okay.
So that was in home. But the first position that I was talking about was actually in a facility. It was a facility where I'd have to go each day to go and, you know, provide my services. It's not something I'd have to, you know, go to the client's home. It's an actual facility. And they said, you know, the majority of our clients happen to be women. So they would prefer a female. And to me, it doesn't make any sense, because it's like, you know, if you were in a hospital, would you say, hey, no, I don't want that male doctor because I'd prefer a female? You know, I'm just there to give you care. That's it, you know? So I don't see why there would be any hesitation. All I want to do is take care of you and help you out. So it's frustrating.
Right.
But, you know, I have to keep, you know, pushing on. It'll get better. I'm not exactly sure how to fix the situation. But the thing that I think is kind of hard with discrimination, it's one of those things that it's kind of hard to say whether or not you're being discriminated, because
based on what you're saying.
You don't know who comes in after you to get the job. You know, but I do know, you know, from what they told me, hey, it's because you're a male.
And so they actually said that too.
Oh, they actually said it. They actually said it. It's because you're a male. They would feel more comfortable with a female. And that right there, that, you know, when you're dealing with a CNA, that's what it's all about, keeping that client comfortable.
Where are you now with that? Are you going to keep going? Are you going to do any kind of research to see what can be done about that?
I'm currently trying to get a position actually in a hospital, because I feel that would be, it would give me more opportunity. The only thing with that is most hospitals look for at least a year experience. And it's kind of hard to get experience when nobody wants to hire you. So it's just, it's kind of a catch-22. But
really?
But I'm optimistic. Just like you said, I just had a baby, so I feel that, you know, it's gonna change. Things are gonna get better. So I have a feeling that I will find a position sooner or later.
And I have a feeling you will too. Don't you give up. Okay. Our next speaker, Professor Segala.
Yes. One of the stories I'd like to share is first to give thanks to my ancestors that have gone before me and the elders that have allowed me to speak today. My native name is Strong Lifeways Woman, so I come with those blessings here, and it's in the area of education. I am a high school pushout from 1971 of North High School. I refuse to say dropout. I believe our academic system there pushes marginalized students out. By marginalized students, I mean students that have come from environments that don't have equitable resources as far as teachers, as far as resources, and as far as community support at a government level. Little did I know, I went to Smedley Elementary School. Little did I know that once I was blessed to become a professor for one of the greatest academic institutions, Metropolitan State College of Denver, under the helm of President Jordan, that I would get to know Dr. Rachel Knoll.
Yes.
Dr. Rachel Knoll, such an inspiration. She was and continues to be to me, because she was very, very important in the civil rights movement here in Denver. And if it wouldn't be for her, one of the schools that she targeted in Keys versus Denver back in the 60s was Smedley Elementary School. Wow. And that is to promote equitable education. We have a problem in this country and we need to address it. And that is not allowing our students to complete their high school education. And I work with all students. I want them to complete a high school education because I want them to have the courage and to go out there in the world and make decisions based on truth. One of my mentors and teachers was Dr. Vincent Harding. Brother Harding and I have had long discussions about this. It is important that we speak this voice. So you are so important. My colleagues here are so important. Aurora City Council Municipal Building, Channel 8 is important. We have to get the word out. We have to be involved in the policies that run our academic systems.
Right. You have any more stories on your side?
I am Native American and I am Chicana Mexicana. We are the lowest of the low as far as academic graduation rates.
Yes.
I would invite anybody to come to the Pine Ridge Reservation or the Rosebud Reservation, which is 8 hours from this doorstep, and see.
That's in the Four Corners.
No,
right?
that's South Dakota.
Oh, okay.
South
okay.
Dakota.
Okay.
And see abject poverty. The median income there is about $6,500 a year. So we have poverty right here in the United States. I believe we need to put our resources and our dollars right back into the communities that need it, specifically with First Peoples whose land was taken. We have a long way to go, but we're only going to get there, as Chief Red Cloud says, is through academic systems. We need to have our students supported there, and we need teachers that want to teach our students and are culturally responsive. That is critically important because we have a saying, "Mitaki ase," which means we are all related, just like those aspen trees, those roots, they're all over the world. We need to get together on this, and we need to find ways that we can have a commonality together and work with strengthening our children and our communities, and don't forget the elders.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I have a question to pose to each of you. We are in 2012, and we've been dealing with segregation, discrimination, racism for eons, for so many years. We've gotten better. We've gotten a little further.
Yes, we have.
We have not gotten where we can actually sit down at the table, just have the discussion, and no one's getting offended.
Thank you.
Because if you're getting offended, then you're not hearing what's going on. You can't get it resolved. Just a nugget. What can we do? What are we doing, not doing, or what do we need to do better to make sure that someone like Kojo can get his certification, can go out there and get the job based on his qualifications, where your child can go to school and get the education, where we don't have any more push-outs. I like that one. What are we missing here?
I feel like the kids are the common ground.
Yes.
The love for our children are a common ground.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what color our kids are, you know, what ethnicity our children are. I believe our kids are a common ground. If we start there and we really change our mentality and understanding, this is the world we're leaving them.
Exactly.
You said something before we came on again, and that it goes to what you said, Monique. when I was talking about him being a dad.
And that's as Lakotas, one of our sayings is we prepare for 7 generations. We need to prepare for those generations to come. As I said before, each one teach one, each one reach one, but we have to go to the policies. We have to be part of the decision-making process. And you have to go to your city council meeting, you have to go to your mayors, to your congressman. You have to be involved.
Yes.
I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, have a voice at the table. The table is there for all of us. Martin Luther King always talked about going to the table. Bring everybody to the table. What's most important to bring to that table is the people that don't want us there. That's really important there, because it is a changing world, and it's changing. How we make change, one person at a time. How we treat people who are different than us.
That's part of your answer. You have to be at the table for wherever that decision or wherever those policies are being made that says we don't want, or no, we just want a woman, or we just want a man. And I don't think that was ever taught to you when you were going for your certification, that you just need to teach on this page, because if you go to the second page, you're not going to get the job anyway.
That's part of your civil rights.
Right.
That's really a part of your civil rights.
Yeah, I definitely, it definitely is part of my civil rights. It's just, I think with Colorado though, being, you know, a right to work state, it's hard to actually fight against that discrimination. It's hard to bring it up sometimes.
Not with prayer. Not with prayer.
But you were told something, and that seems to be a violation.
It does.
That's
it does.
true.
And you need to advocate for yourself so that your child later on will understand why they need to advocate for themselves.
That's right. It's a new day.
It's a new day.
It's a new day, as the Mayan elders say. Mayan Miguel and Teresita, they're both Mayan elders on 2012. I've been humbled and blessed to be around their teachings. But it's we all work together because we are all connected in this world. And our issues, we're going to have issues. Let's work on the issues. Don't be afraid of those issues. We're going to find a commonality, because through the problems we're going to find commonality. Let's get to them. Let's work on the problems and create that better tomorrow, because it's only through us that we're going to get that mountaintop together.
We'll get to that mountaintop. Thank you, guys. Thank you
you
very
so
much. Monique, Kojo, Professor Segala.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much. And I'd like to thank the community and the viewers for joining the commemoration as we celebrate the life and legacy of one man's dream and freedom and equality for all. For more details on the rest of the week's activities, you can go to auroragov.org. And additionally, the Aurora Relations Commission has several openings, and anyone is invited to apply if interested. You can go to auroragov.org as well. Monique, I know you don't have time, but if you at some point, feel free to come and meet with us, join us. We'll meet the first Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock here in this building in the Aurora Room. I expect you to apply.
Oh, I will.
I would love to see that application come through.
And if you need further employment assistance, come down to the Career Connection Center at Goodwill.
And me, I'm here to help also.
All right.
Yes.
Ladies, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all America City.
Hey, Ted.
Hey, Fred.
New mower, Ted?
Yes, it is, Fred.
Yeah, looks good in red. You didn't buy that in Denver.
Oh, no. I shopped Aurora instead.
Yeah, good call, Ted.
You too, Fred?
Of course. By shopping here, my tax dollars help Aurora stay ahead.
Hey guys, check out this new mower I just got in Denver.
Oh, Ned.
Ted and Fred know that by shopping in Aurora, their tax money will help support Aurora libraries, parks, streets, and other city services.
New shoes, Fred? See? Ted's.
Shop Aurora. It just makes sense.
While many of us enjoy the snow in Colorado, severe winter storms are a common occurrence that no resident should take lightly. Prepare for the cold weather by equipping your home with a 3-day supply of food, water, and prescription medications for each member of your family. Be sure to also have blankets, flashlights, batteries, battery-powered radio, and a first aid kit on hand. If your heat goes out during a winter storm, keep warm by closing off rooms that you don't need and use only safe sources of heat. Dress in layers of lightweight clothing and wear a cap, as most of your body heat is lost through your head. Taking the necessary steps to prepare for Colorado's wintry weather can give you peace of mind and protect the health and safety of your household.
If only our paychecks were growing as fast as our kids. Good thing we got extra money back from the IRS on our taxes.
We can afford all this?
Yeah. It's something called the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Can we help set the table?
When you make less than $42,000 a year, it makes all the difference.
See if you qualify at irs.gov.
I'd love a new romance.
Take your pick.
I love a good mystery.
Who's your favorite author?
Hey, what about me?
We have a special kids section just for you. The Friends of the Aurora Public Library book outlet has just about everything you could want at incredible prices. Paperbacks are just 50 cents to $1. Most hardcover books are $1 to $3. And these great deals come with an added bonus. Proceeds from the book outlet go to the Aurora Public Libraries to help pay for materials and programs. So books bought here, put books on the shelf here. You can also help by donating your old favorites. From the classics to current authors, new books are always coming out. And the volunteer staff is happy to help you at the book outlet in the Iliff Square Shopping Center at the northwest corner of Iliff and Peoria. Come find a treasure, get a great deal, and help the Aurora Public Libraries.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vern L. Howard, and I am the chairman of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Colorado Holiday Commission, and welcome to the Civil Rights Stories. I am joined here today with Theo Wilson to my far right, Quincy Hines to my immediate right, and Mr. Lauren, our pastor, Dr. Lauren Jackson. Welcome. We're going to take time this evening to talk about not just civil rights, but human rights and how things have changed, the history of how things have changed, and where we are today in 2012. We're going to start to my far right with Theo Wilson. Welcome, Theo.
How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, and yourself?
All right. Yeah, it's great to be here. My introduction to civil rights was kind of abrupt. Well, first of all, I began with the NAACP youth chapter here in Denver. And so I got like a real early exposure to being in the community and working on the issues that matter the most to the African American community. I don't know if you remember back in 1997, there was a series of murders done by the Aryan Nation. One of them was a brother from Africa. They had a Stop the Violence rally, and that was like my first public speaking gig ever. And so I was the publicity chairperson for that. And then I had an interesting awakening. I attended a school called Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. And my freshman year began in 1999. And I mean, like 99 to some of the young kids may seem like a far time away, but I remember like yesterday, like you know, I'm trying to create the atmosphere. Lil Wayne's album had just come out. Everybody was listening to Jay-Z, Nas, Beyonce. Like that's the time period I went to school. And now that was also the year, if you remember, of Columbine.
Okay.
When the shooting went off over there in Inglewood, God rest everybody's souls who was lost there. And so that year, I don't know why it did not make the news that 2 bombs were not threatened, but actually detonated on my campus. 2 bombs went off. And when I remember the first one went off, I was on my way to the main building called Lee Hall. It's at the top of the hill. Florida A&M is arranged on a hill. It used to be a slave plantation. And at the top of the hill is where the main administrative facility is. And I was on my way there, and I see smoke coming out of the building, and I see the president of the university exiting the building. And I'm like, what in God's name is going on here? And it turns out that, you know, all the news media show up, and they start to rope off the campus. The FBI comes in, and they have to redirect the bus routes because where the building is, so the top of the hill is located right at the bus route. And so I remember being completely shocked at that. Like, I went all the way away from Colorado, where there was all kind of indecent things going on. And then, like, when it came to the areas of race relations, at least in that time period. And then I'm in Florida A&M, supposedly surrounded by, you know, a lot of African-American people, supposed to be a safe environment. And here I am with a bomb getting detonated on school grounds. And 2 weeks later, my roommate comes back into the dorm and tells me that a larger bomb had been detonated in what's called the Perry Page Military Building there. And I could not believe it. And once again, the entire fiasco was repeated. The FBI comes in. There's yellow tape everywhere. And I'm sitting up here like, what world do I live in now? Because last night I checked, we were at that time in the 90s going into the 2000s. And so they caught the guy. He was a racist guy named Lombardi. His last name was Lombardi. And nothing ever happened with that story. But what makes this so interesting is that this is the capital of Florida in 1999. What happened the next year in the capital of Florida? The elections, Bush versus Gore. And so I found it interesting that after the bomb was detonated, cameras were placed everywhere. All of a sudden, there's surveillance on Florida A&M University that there's never been before. And then the year just turns around and Bush gets elected, and my friends are getting turned away from the polls, left and right, an hour early, far before anything was supposed to happen. Votes were not being counted, and if you could have been there, what felt like the center of the universe, we were there, and the atmosphere was crazy. There was fear. People were talking all kind of manner of things. Friends of mine were buying weapons. Like, we thought it was going to go that direction. Unfortunately, it did not. But it got me into spoken word poetry. I used my spoken word poetry as, in the beginning, a means of activism. Purely activism, because the old soapboxes of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X's day, where you could set it up on the corner and talk to the people, get a bullhorn, those were gone. But people were gathering in spoken word facilities. And I never lost that as my primary focus, because nobody forgets 2 bombs being detonated with no news coverage nationally.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's how I got my start into the fight for justice, really, as a grown man.
Wow. Quite interesting. And was that something that, well, it stuck with you, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And the demographics, was it primarily African American?
Florida A&M University is, I believe, the largest historically black college or university on American soil.
And Mr. Lombardi, was he a student there?
No, he wasn't.
Was he on the staff?
He wasn't staff. He was completely an outsider.
Okay.
And the funny thing was that nobody died. There were no injuries. It just happened that way.
All right,
Yeah.
super. All right, well, thank you.
No problem.
Quincy, a lot of folks call you Q.
Good evening.
Tell us your story.
Well, my story is basically about Black Wall Street. I don't know if a lot of people have actually heard of Black Wall Street, but Black Wall Street actually
occurred in Greenwood, Oklahoma, 1921. So what had actually wound up happening is that this was a city comprised of primarily all black African Americans, black-owned businesses, estimated over 300 worth, hospitals, grocery stores, churches, barbecue joints, and so on and so forth. The thing that I remember reading when I read this story was basically, how allegedly the government basically dropped bombs. Once they found out what was going on with the city, over 35 blocks were burned.
Yes.
Allegedly over 3,300 people had actually lost their lives. My thing is that I really don't understand how in the world a society coming up the way we are, people, men and women, just like you and I, wound up losing their lives, living their life every day. I don't understand how that works. So basically it all begins where, obviously they tried to come back and they tried to, rebuild the city. They weren't able to rebuild the city because of, permit issues or, what have you during that time. But resources weren't provided for them. They weren't able to, buy wood to build the buildings, rebuild the buildings, just all of that. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal how the entire situation just occurred. And the fact is that a lot of people don't know about our history. It was 1921. It wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean? It wasn't that long ago at all, but yet and still, it's not taught in the history books. It's not taught in school. It's not, I don't know if it's, necessarily taught in every college, but I know it's definitely not taught in schools. And our kids need to know about exactly what's going on with our civilization. And, obviously our black history needs to be taught the way it occurred.
Question now, give people an idea where Greenwood is in comparison to maybe Tulsa, because a lot of people know of Tulsa, Oklahoma as being the home of Black Wall Street. So if you were to compare Denver to Aurora and the proximity, can you do that?
Basically, the dividing line was, as far as I understand, was actually a railroad track that divided the two cities. So Greenwood was actually like a subdivision of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, it comprised of like, 35 blocks or so?
Okay. Now, how did that story impact you? Obviously, I've always said that people with no past are people with no future.
Right.
You have to know where you came from before you know where you're going.
Absolutely.
With that being the case, and you're a younger man, share with us what your goal in telling that story would be.
The reason why I'm telling that story is definitely not to perpetuate hate. It's to educate us. Obviously, we can't know where we're going unless we know where we came from. Right. The reason why I'm so passionate about this story is because a lot of African Americans believe that we can't, we can't become educated. A lot of actually people believe that we can't be educated, that we are subhuman and so forth. But this was a city where money circulated 65 times before it left the community. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? How powerful is that to know that money circulating 65 times to help build other local businesses and just to build up the community? So my thing is that, to tell everyone else out there, obviously, if you feel like, you're inferior, it's only because you feel inferior, and it's not because you're actually putting out the effort to become that which you are destined to become.
There was a candidate running for the Republican nomination recently who is no longer in the race, but he had mentioned that if you're poor, it's because you want to be poor. What is your take on that?
Unfortunately, our circumstances aren't necessarily what when we're born into these circumstances, that doesn't necessarily make us who we are. I mean, if we're poor because we want to be poor, sometimes we don't see outside of our little box.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We're poor most likely because we want to be poor, but also the resources weren't readily available to us. Some of the rich folks, I mean, they teach their young to maintain their wealth.
Right.
They put them in schools that help them to understand how to maintain their wealth. And unfortunately in our society, some of the schools that are closing down, obviously there are those schools that aren't doing well. You know what I mean? So we're not teaching our wealth-sustaining policies, if you will, or doctrine, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that, obviously, if we're poor, we definitely need those resources to be available to us so that we can learn how to be what we've never been before.
Absolutely. And again, to know where you're going, you have to know where you came from.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir. That's actually it.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Jackson.
Yes.
You know, you and I are the two more mature gentlemen of this panel, if I may.
I think we're the seniors.
There you go. And I flash my AARP card quite often.
Yeah. I have one also.
Share with us your story. Now, being that you're in the ministry, you're Reverend Dr.
I am.
Jackson, actually.
Right.
So share with us. Where are you from?
I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
I grew up at a time in St. Louis where segregation was the norm. Okay. It was the way of life. And it was interesting to hear Q talk about the Black Wall Street.
Yes.
Because in St. Louis at that time, you had geographical boundaries where black people could live. And we had, much like they had in the community outside of Tulsa, we had our own school systems. We were part of the St. Louis public school system, but they were black schools staffed by black teachers, which taught us what it meant to be black in America. And in that context, we were taught that because we were living in a segregated society, it was not that we were less, but we needed to be prepared and equipped to address, to deal with the issues. And so we were issue oriented and prepared to meet the forces. And economically, we had our own community. We had our own shows. We had our own restaurants. We had our own craftsmen, people who wanted to learn trades. They were taught by other people in the community. So we had our own, I laugh to this day about financial systems. People today probably don't even think much about people going through the community actually lending money. And so you had people of means who had economics, and they were recognized, and if you needed to borrow $2,000, $3,000, you go to that person with an understanding that you want to pay them back and so forth. So we had our own economic system. But the other aspect of that is because we were taught to be aware of the society and world in which we live, we were being equipped to deal with the racism that was around us, to combat it when needed be. Even as I went through high school, our high schools were still pretty segregated, and there were incidences, racial incidences that happened when we would go to other communities and things of that nature. But that was a part of life, and so you were equipped to deal with it. I grew up with a civil rights mentality. I grew up knowing that we lived in an unjust society, and there would be times when we would have to deal with it, and I need to be equipped to deal with it. And I'd like to highlight, particularly when I was at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, state school, Central Missouri, Columbia, Missouri is in Central Missouri, and it's as far south as you ever want to go. I mean, it was, they would say things to you that were derogatory, and they would say them openly. And so that which I had been equipped to do growing up in St. Louis, I was ready to deal with that. I was also an athlete, a football player. I played football for University of Missouri, and so I would say I probably have an aggressive nature when it comes to things of that nature. And so I mean, I wasn't passive when it happened. I would help people to understand that what you said is very inappropriate, and you may be accustomed to saying that, but you need to change your customs as a matter of respect.
How far did that get you?
It got me a lot, because I think the other part of that is I was at the University of Missouri, which is called Mizzou, and I played for Dan Devine, who was one of the most progressive college coaches in America. he would not tolerate racism on the football team. And he would always say that America's problem was not going to become a part of his football team. And he said when America's problem and his values conflicted, we would live by divine principles. His name was Dan Divine, so we were going to live by divine principles. And he was a phenomenal coach. He was the coach that brought the first black quarterback into the then Big Eight. We had a racial incident that one of our star players' parents was insisting that he not room with a black guy, and to put him off the team was going to cost us the championship in 1969, and so Coach Divine put him off the team, and because he was going to live by his principles. But to his credit, he came back on his own and disavowed his mother's belief, and we won the championship. But also at the University of Missouri, I was one of the persons who founded what still exists, the Legion of Black Collegians, that fought for students' rights, the rights of African American students at the University of Missouri. So when I hear people talking about civil rights and living through that era of time, it's very real for me. It's not simply out of the history books. It is part of my history. I can remember very, very clearly our marches, our standing up, fighting for rights, all of that. Even at the local level, at the Missouri level, but all of that was a part of life then.
Looking back at 1969 when you won the national championship, a year prior to that was the assassination of Dr. King.
It was.
And riots broke out all over the nation.
That's
California,
right.
Detroit.
Everywhere.
Even where you were. Give us the demographics or the percentage, the breakdowns of Missouri State, white to black racial.
I don't know what the demographics are in terms of actual racial numbers, but the majority at that time were Anglo.
Okay.
Surely those who were in power were Anglo.
Okay.
At the University of Missouri, where I was in '68 when Dr. King died, the African American student body at Mizzou was less than 1%.
Okay.
And so we needed a voice that said we are here and we are to be respected. And I to his credit, Coach Divine helped to give us that voice at that time, and he did a number of things that helped change the climate of the University of Missouri. And just keep in mind, he was the football coach.
Absolutely.
And so he had a lot of power, and he was also the athletic director.
Absolutely.
But Columbia, Missouri was still very, very conservative. There are flashbacks in my mind from just walking around campus where I had to educate some of my peers in terms of behavior.
In fact, you and Quincy both had spoke about black economics, and how you said that the black dollar actually recycled through the community 64 times before it left.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't realize today is that in the United States of America, the black dollar was a $900 billion investment in this nation last year. And it leaves the community within 15 minutes of being spent. In fact, if we were to take the entire buying power of the black dollar that was spent in the U.S. in 2010, 2011, we would be the 5th or 6th largest nation on Earth.
On Earth, yeah.
And the thing is that I always, a friend of mine, Carlos Gura, I stole this from him. We talk about civil rights. These are called the civil rights stories. And one of the things that I like to remind people of is that if we respect each other's human rights, we wouldn't need civil rights.
Right.
And there's something wrong when civil rights is the thing that we have to focus on. So my question, starting with you, Theo Q, and then you, Dr. Jackson, how do you believe and what do you believe we can do to recognize appreciate and respect each other's human rights?
First thing we got to do is be honest. Let's take a really, really real assessment about the world that we live in today. It's a corporatocracy. These financial principles that you were speaking about, I have to address this about the guys in the Republican Party who said that African Americans are poor, or poor people are poor because they want to be poor. You're dealing with a 400-year head start financially, 250 years of direct free labor, building corporations that are still standing today and exploiting the globe. Yeah. This is the reality of it. There's more people that have died over global capitalism than there have been all the communist regimes combined. When you're talking about the rape of Africa, when you're talking about the underdevelopment, systematic underdevelopment of the third world, these are human rights. These are human rights, and nobody wants to see it when it comes past their paycheck, us included, because what we call poverty here in America, my ancestors and my family down in Jamaica, they'd say you're living large because there's no place to plug into Xbox down in Kingston.
Exactly.
Okay. This is they live in shanty towns. They make their places of residence. Okay.
Right.
And but I'm sorry. Let me just wrap this up here. The thing about it is that the next frontier of human rights is economic balancing, because there's too many people who have too little.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, let me speak to that if I may. Here, I think there's a couple of things that...
I'm going to ask you to take just about a minute, if you will.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think we need to affirm. And one of the phrases that we use is cultural tolerance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that word, the word tolerance, means that I have power to tolerate you. The phrase we should use is cultural affirmation, which affirms that everyone has a right to be, and whatever that might be.
That.
And the other part of this is I've done ministry internationally, and particularly in Africa and in Kenya, and you're right. There's no places out in the rural, you don't plug up boxes. Poverty there is running rampant. If we move, a number of people will retire and go to foreign countries to live because their retirement is $30,000, where they can live fabulously for $30,000 a year, something like that.
Costa Rica, I have a friend who recently moved to Costa Rica because our dollar outdoes theirs by about 1,000%. Q, we're going to wrap up with you.
Okay. My thing is that we have been entirely complacent based on our situation and where we are today. 49 years ago, Martin Luther King actually delivered a speech on Washington, D.C. Over 1 million people attended this march, or this speech. And the thing is that we basically look at it as, okay, it was back in 1963, but this is where we are in 2012. We're not that far removed from 1963. So our situation right now, granted we have President Obama as a president currently, but we still have a long way to go. And until our inalienable rights are basically addressed and served, I mean, where are we going to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
And it's left up to us, you know, you gentlemen as the upcoming generation, you and I as the more progressed generation, to make sure that these rights are not only realized, recognized, but respected.
Absolutely.
Folks, we want to thank you for joining us here tonight. And remember, you have rights. Vote, and you will have your voice heard. Register to vote. So this way, if you have an issue, you can at least cast your vote and be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good night.
watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all-America City.
Preparing your federal taxes can be taxing. The forms, the math, that one. But with Free File from the IRS, it can be far less taxing. Because Free File does all the hard work for you with brand name tax software or online fillable forms. Even better, Free File is free, and it's exclusively from the IRS at freefile.irs.gov. She's done. Give it a shot.
Water busters, what do you want? People over Aurora just wasting water. Water busters are on their way. Where do you think you're headed? To Consumption Car Scene Car Wash. Better think twice.
Take your car to a car wash where they actually recycle their water.
Or wash your car at home with a bucket and a hose nozzle.
Thanks, Water Busters.
Water's disappearing, and it don't look good. Who are you gonna call? Water Busters!
My dad taught me practice makes perfect.
My dad taught me to tie my shoes.
My dad taught me how to keep the monsters away.
Be there for your kids. It matters. For more information, visit coloradodads.com.
I can solve difficult problems for a Fortune 500 company.
I can run a successful business. I can put my military experience to work for your company.
I can manage your home improvements.
I can publicize a message.
I can teach your children.
But I can't put my skills to work for your organization
if I'm not given the opportunity.
Nearly 50 million Americans have disabilities. Capitalize on their talents with employment practices that benefit everyone. Learn more at whatcanyoudocampaign.org.
From exploring Europe to conquering X Camp, Girl Scouts today offers so many incredible opportunities. The only problem you'll have is deciding what to do. So, what did you do today?
For the millions living with COPD, breathing becomes a struggle. COPD is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. You may have heard of it as chronic bronchitis or emphysema. Over time, you feel like you're breathing through a straw. It's the 4th leading cause of death in the US, and it took my grandmother. If you're over 35 and have ever smoked, you could be at risk. Good news is, you can improve your symptoms. I'm Danica Patrick, and I drive for COPD. Join the movement at driveforcopd.com, take our screening questionnaire today, and talk to your doctor.
You're watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all-America City.
Hello, I'm Barbara Shannon Bannister, Chief of the Community Relations Division for the City of Aurora. Welcome, we're so glad that you're joining us. I'd like to introduce my guests first. We have Mr. Andrew Lakanu from the Yoruba tribe, and Ms. Sagale from the Chicano Studies at Metropolitan State College, and Reverend Dr. LaRon Jackson. Thank you for being with us today. We certainly appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
2012 is the City of Aurora's 26th annual continuous week-long commemoration. We started this back in 1987. Governor Lamb appointed a commission, the Colorado Holiday Commission, in 1985 under the direction of the under the direction of Wilma Webb and her husband. And then the first Denver, or the first Colorado Commission celebration was in Denver in 1986. They celebrated their 26th year last year, and we celebrated our 25th. So this is our 26th year. Our subject matter tonight is different from previous years. We're going to be dealing with civil rights issues, and the people on this panel have lots of stories to tell. There are 5 groups of organizations who are participating with the Civil Rights Stories, and this will be our 6th taping. They are the Human Relations Commission, the Aurora Branch NAACP, Covenant Technology, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr Holiday Commission, and then my own personal group, Grand Design. Mr. Lakanu, tell us a little bit about your involvement in civil rights here in the United States, and you're from Nigeria.
Yes, quite interesting. I departed for United States in 1982, but prior to my coming here, my father advised me that I should not go to school in the South. Then I asked him that, why? Of course, you are not allowed to ask questions. He said, follow what I said. Do not go to the school in the South of America. I was like, but I've heard that the culture in the South seems similar to where I came from, in Lagos, Nigeria. So I wanted to go to the South. Anyway, I ended up at Howard State University in Washington, D.C. But as stubborn as I am, I found my way to the South.
You did, huh?
Yes, I went to Jackson State University.
I see.
Jackson State has a strong and historical view when it comes to civil rights. In 1970, 1800, Jackson State was built in a white area. But because of racism, they have to move from there down to Lynch Street, which is very popular, which is named after J.R. Lynch, the first black congressman. It's well documented. So they face a lot of racial issues. But that time, in 1970, there was an event of American protesting the Vietnam War, the U.S. troops to Cambodia, the civil rights strikes, the inclusion of non-inclusion of women in all male colleges.
Yes, of course.
And then that's created a riot. But then Medgar Evers' brother was killed, Charles Evers. Thank you. And then that created a bigger problem. The ROTC building was bombed, and everybody was in commotion. But when the white group are coming from work, they have to pass through Lynch Street.
I see.
And of course, the black brothers, our students, would throw stones. And they both exchange racial slurs.
I see.
But eventually, the government, the governor sent in the National Guard and the U.S. troops. Somewhere along the line, 4 people were killed at Kent State, and that geared them up to more. The protests were not organized. It could have been different if organized. Government probably would have listened more. But I mean, these are people that they are very angry. So at the end of the day, 2 people died in the school campus. 2 students, 121 and 117. And they have a huge monument there now that always interests me. In fact, I went there last summer. I took my children to let them see this event. The monuments are there. They are nice, Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Green. So we learn a lot from that. I learned a lot from that. And why did I study sociology? It's to get involved in the community.
Yes.
And I'm very fortunate that when I came to Colorado, I got employed at Aurora Mental Health, whereby community events is preached by our administrators. We are involved in supporting the Aurora Warm the Night, where we do attend the KCRT meeting, the human relations with the KCRT. Thank you. So all those things to me resulted from that, reaching out and helping people. And there's more we do at Aurora Mental Health.
So, and how long have you been in this country?
Too long.
Too long? Oh, too
Close
long.
to 30 years.
30 years?
And I've been at Aurora Mental Health in 15 years.
15 years.
Simply because of the program that they offer, how they encourage us to get involved in the community. I would say this, regarding race, color, we don't look at that when we take care of our clients, and this is true. Our ES department is open like round the clock. So all those things, we work with the juveniles, we work with offenders, and the admit program headed by Mr. Olsen is one of the best programs we have in the state.
Yes.
Changing people's life despite color, races, political affiliation, treating them and trusting them into the community, making them stable. We do good at that.
Yes, under the direction of Dr. Randy Stiff, the Aurora Mental Health is held in very high esteem in Aurora, and of course in the nation. We are we are out there in front, like a lot of organizations in Aurora. And
Agreed.
So Aurora Mental Health is really on top of it.
Agreed.
Thank you for your.
We have
Go
a
ahead.
good diversity with our staff and the programs. And our diversity program, we have series of events like Black History Month, which we do annually, very entertaining, and so many events, so many programs. But we can grow more with grants coming our way, and people giving contribution. We can do a lot more.
That's
yes,
right.
thank you.
Miss Christina Sagala.
Yes.
So nice to have you back
Thank
again.
you so much for
and
having
you're just
me.
so beautiful, and we just
Thank you.
just so proud to have you. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Metropolitan State College with Chicano Studies.
Well, I'm blessed and honored to be at one of the most premier universities. We will become a university soon under the helm of President Jordan. I have worked there for almost 10 years as a professor in different departments, Native American Studies. I also worked in social work, and for the last 6.5 years I've been in the Chicano Studies department. What's very critical for me is to teach, I like to teach the introduction to Chicano Studies because it's about civil rights and human rights. I weave in some of the Native American civil rights stories. It's very critical to teach this history to the students. Primarily, the students are required to take a multicultural class, and I ask them, why do you want to take Chicano Studies other than African and African American Studies or Native American Studies? Critical analysis. We have to help those students become better at that. And many of them say they don't know, and it's true because it's not taught in the history books. I have taught students who are majors, history majors. They don't know about our beloved Dr. Rachel B. Noel. They don't know her story and how critically she's important to desegregating marginalized communities in the 60s and 70s there. Many of them have never heard of Dr. Vincent Harding, our brother elder of and scholar of the civil rights. It's important that they hear about these stories, Dolores Huerta. It's critically important that they hear of Lalo Delgado, Denver's first poet laureate. I'm very honored that I've been able to write the Diversity Initiative grant for the last 5 years under the President's Diversity Commission under Dr. Myron Anderson and his staff, who has allowed this event to happen. We must work together to get the information out. History is told, as we know, from the lenses of the victor. So
that's right.
what is important is that we get these stories out there, and I am very, very glad to say that many of my students, more than 90% of my students, come out of that class saying, thank you, Professor Sagala. I didn't know this about our African American brothers and sisters who were at the forefront of the civil rights movement to help the Native Americans with their civil rights movement, the Chicano Studies, Chicano Civil Rights Movement. I used to belong to Anita Gonzalez, the CEO of Escuela Tlatelolco, a wonderful friend of mine, a wonderful civil rights leader in her own right. Her father, Corky Gonzalez, had an organization that I was a part of when I was 16, 17 years old, called the Crusade for Justice. There's a story about the Crusade for Justice that's not told out there. They often view it a very harsh organization. The opposite side, or the duality of that, because there's dualities in everything in life, is that I was mentored there. I was tutored with other people, math, English, spelling. And without these beautiful leaders in our life, it would be hard for us to move forward. I live by one of the blessings that Brother Harding told us, and I've said it before, each one teach one, each one reach one. We have that responsibility to help each other.
That's right.
To not, we are going to disagree. That's a fact. But where's the commonality there? How can we come to a common goal that is going to be good for you, good for them, and we come to a middle?
That's right.
One of the areas that I've written on and I've presented on is the integration of spirituality into the clinical assessment process.
Okay.
Some people have called me a curandera, which is a healer. I call myself a helper.
Okay.
I want to help because we don't all heal the same way.
That's right.
So when I have my colleague, my new brother right beside me now at one of the best mental health places in the United States, I'm very encouraged. One of the things that we do in curanderismo is plática, which is corazón cura corazón, which means heart heals heart. And Dr. Christine Cho, a phenomenal psychologist and a friend of mine, once told me that in her culture, which is Chinese, there's not a word for psychology.
That's right.
And it means doctors of the heart.
Wonderful.
And
All right.
how do we work? How does change happen? One person at a time.
Exactly.
How we treat people who are different than
That's
us.
right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank
You know, I'm one of the corn mothers.
Oh, my
Yes.
goodness.
Yes, and I'm so proud to be a part of the display out at the Metropolitan States
I
Museum.
was a part of that grant
Yes.
writing
Oh,
and
great.
Food preparation. That's where I like to be.
Yes, well, I'm one of the corn mothers.
I'm so honored
Well,
to meet you.
I'm so honored to meet you, too.
Thank you.
All right, Reverend Dr. LaRon Jackson. You remember where we first met? We were on the board of the Alzheimer's Association.
That's right. That's exactly right. We were.
And tell us a little bit about all your traveling. I know you were down in New Orleans after Katrina and looking at things that haven't changed a lot since Katrina.
Right.
But talk about your involvement in the community and your mission.
Okay. In terms of just ministry itself, I have had a pretty broad ministerial background, which includes pastoring churches, curriculum development for various faith communities, and developing ministries into outreach into the community. I've been blessed to do that in 3 different cities across the United States: Camden, New Jersey, Denver, Colorado, and New Orleans, Louisiana. And in each one of them, my outreach ministry and work has been seen as very outstanding, I'm glad to say. In fact, in 2001, the U.S. Department of Commerce, I was at Cooper Hospital, Camden, New Jersey at that time. The U.S. Department of Commerce recognized Cooper Hospital for developing one of the best models of community networking in the nation. And then later, when the president from Cooper came to St. Joseph's here in Denver, he asked me to come with him and replicate the model. And then he went to a hospital in New Orleans. He asked me to come with him in New Orleans and replicate the model. So I've been blessed to do ministry even internationally around the world. In addition, talking about our civil rights and human rights, I've been blessed to teach at several colleges and seminaries. And one of the courses that I've taught is the historical theology of the Black church. And part of that whole process of the theology of the Black church is to understand how the Black church played a critical role in the economic and educational development of the slave population in this nation. Even there's a book by John M. Beatty which talks about the cultural transformation from Africa to America. And Dr. M. Beatty talks about the over 300 religions in Africa that has a common concept of a supreme being and a spiritual world that interacts with the living world. And so in that context, when you began to talk about the Christian faith and its role in the education of African people who were coming out of slavery, as well as fighting for human rights and civil rights, it was the church that had the critical foundation and had the
power in the community.
Power. Yeah, it had
Yes.
the dynamic role
Yes.
to do that. And even out of my own youth, I grew up in a very segregated St. Louis, Missouri. But in that context, we had in those days in St. Louis, Missouri, African Americans live within a certain geographic boundary.
The segregated boundaries. Yes, the segregated boundaries. That's right.
But within that boundary, we did not let segregation take away our human rights, our right to be. We were educated by educators who understood the context and culture in which we were living, and they prepared us academically to negotiate that culture. It was commonly when I was in the kindergarten, and I never will forget my two kindergarten teachers. One was named Miss Fisher, and the other one was named Miss Tyler.
You know, I can remember my kindergarten teacher too.
And they used to always teach us. They said, "You're not less. You are better, and you're equipped." And they would say, "You just always have to remember, you live in a context which requires you to do more for others to recognize that." And so they were always there. Economically, when everybody's poor, you don't really think about being poor because everybody's poor. But in the context in which we grew up, we had our own economic systems. We had our own stores. We had our own barbershops. We had our own restaurants. We had our own movie theaters. We had our own doctors. We even had our own, I laugh when I think about them, loan institutions. Loan institutions were not necessarily banks. They were individuals who had wherewithal, and people would go and borrow money from them, and they would pay them back. But I think the reality is when you recognize that you're fighting against a system that's trying to oppress you, it generates certain strength within because you will not yield to that. And especially when you are being brought up in the Christian faith, when the Christian faith, continues to tell the stories of how God delivers the oppressed and what he does in that regard. And so within that context, is how I grew up in St. Louis, and it carries over even to my theological understanding today in terms of how I interact with people. One of the things that I often hear people say, and when I'm teaching, especially cultural dynamics, we often talk about cultural tolerance. And I've said on more than one occasion, cultural tolerance implies that someone has power over someone else. To be tolerated means that you have power over someone and you will just allow them to exist, as opposed to cultural affirmation, which says a person has a right to be as they are, and you have no say in that. They have their, and I think that's where we need to still grow towards as we interact one with the other. Yeah.
Let me do a quote, and I want you to think about this. It said, "If the cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny."
Yes.
So what does that say to us?
We got issues, and we got to address those issues head on. One of the issues we have, a big issue, is immigration. We need to call it like it is. We need to put the people at the table of change and talk about the inequitable systems, not only for our immigrants from Mexico, but why is there favoritism? Dolores Huerta, civil rights leader, was at our college a couple of years ago and pointed out very adequately to us, audience, that those that come over the Canadian border do not have the same restrictions, or those that come from different countries don't have the same restrictions. Mexican immigrants were invited here. They were invited here and then told to leave, as well as our Japanese brothers and sisters and our Irish brothers and sisters. We have a problem. We need to deal with it.
Yeah. All right, go
one
ahead.
One of the things that quote says to me, and when you think about the Declaration of Independence, it talks about certain inalienable human rights, things that cannot be separated from us as we exist. When I translate that into my Christian thought or Christian understanding, it speaks to my right to be, and it speaks to a power beyond me that will continue to give me and equip me and to encourage me and to stand up against those forces that would destroy me. And one of the things that we don't take seriously enough, but you look at people who fight oppression in South America and Africa and other places, to perish doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've given your life for the advancement of the cause. And when you're willing to give your life for the advancement of the cause, and that reason we sit here, for all who've given their lives already, for us to be here, you are still part of the force of victory. And there's a power greater than us that cannot die.
That's right.
And will not die.
That's right.
And it will continue to imbue and infuse every generation. When we threaten to be denied that which belongs to us by the rights of who we are. So our destiny is directly tied to America's destiny. If everybody is to have certain rights and be free, then that means everybody. And those who are denied have a right to protest, stand up, and rebel against forces that will deny that.
That's right. That's right.
I would see that as saying that our destiny is in our own hands.
Yes.
Okay, and but before that, we have to build a very strong character. Because, like I used to say when I do public speaking, character is very important. My old professor used to say, when character is lost, all is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When wealth is lost, something is lost. And when wealth is lost, actually nothing is lost. So we have to develop our character. We have our own destiny in our own hands. Why we struggle towards success, why we struggle towards maintaining stability, we will learn something along the way, either we made it or not. I sincerely believe that.
Yes, yes.
Like I always tell my clients, you know, keep trying. Keep trying, you know. Along the line, you might be stable, but somewhere along the line, you'll feel better.
That's right.
With a good support system.
That's right.
So we all need to support each other.
That's right.
In that wise, and just keep striving, striving for the best.
Another one of the quotes that Martin Luther King said was, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So if you're everything you need to be, and I'm everything I need to be, and we're all everything we all of us need to be, then we got it together, huh?
Yes.
We got it together. And then that means we're stronger, we're all interrelated, because what you do to me, you do to yourself.
Exactly.
Just like you said about the aspen trees?
The aspen trees, the roots, and also the Lakota philosophy, metaki ase. Also, it's in our African American community. We are all related.
Yes.
We are all related. So your words are so sacred and so important, and all of our words are important here.
That's right.
Our
That's right.
audience is important, who's hearing these words. What are you going to do with it?
Okay,
Let's help
that's
each
right.
other.
Well, thank you for joining us. And the discussion was just powerful. And I want the audience to remember that that's our theme this year. Remember, celebrate, and what do you do out there? Act. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes.
watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all America City.
Hi, Stacy. Oh, hey, Lauren. Oh, you went shopping. You too. Wasn't traffic awful? Traffic? No, it was easy.
Easy? How did you miss that traffic jam on I-25?
I-25, where did you go?
To Park Met.
No. Why would you drive all the way down there when you can get all of this in Aurora?
Those are the same stores that I went to.
Plus, when I shop in Aurora, my tax money stays in Aurora for our parks, schools, police.
And you didn't have all that traffic.
I always shop in Aurora. It just makes sense.
Show me what you got.
Shop Aurora. It just makes sense.
This is on sale. Oh, wait.
The top 2 causes of winter driving accidents in Colorado are driving too fast for the conditions and following too closely. At the Colorado Department of Transportation, crews battle snow and ice on our state highways. Use extra caution when passing a plow truck. Never pass on the right and slow way down on slick roads.
Please slow down. We want you to get there safely.
At CDOT, we're taking care to get you there.
They paved paradise and put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
What if there was a way to heal someone? To have the power to stop someone from dying? There is a way. And it's you. Thousands of patients are searching for a marrow donor. Join the Be the Match Marrow Registry and be the one to save a life.
A factory closes. Jobs are lost. The old way was to simply give people a hot meal. This is the United Way.
How you doing?
Right here in our community, United Way is changing the way from quick fixes to real lasting change. That's what matters. That's United Way. To learn how you can help your community, visit unitedway.org.
Thank you for giving me blood.
Thank you for giving me shelter.
Thank you for saving my life.
Support the Red Cross and change a life, starting with your own.
You're watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all America City.
Good day. I'm Barbara Shannon Bannister, Chief of the Community Relations Division. Thank you for joining us. To my far right is Mr. Quincy Hines. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you.
And we have Ms. Veronica O. White, who is the Chair of the Human Relations Commission right next to me.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Vern L. Howard, who is the Chair of the Dr. Martin Luther King Holiday Commission. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. B.
I'm glad it's a jolly time. All right, tell us why we're here, please.
Well, we're here actually to celebrate Aurora's 26th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. commemoration. And Aurora is, as I found out this year again, the only city in the state that celebrates a week-long activity. But we're here tonight to celebrate the Civil Rights Stories. The Civil Rights Stories is something that's exciting to me to have been a part of, and each member up here is also a part of. And the Civil Rights Stories is about preserving oral and oral history. Each of us has a civil rights stories to tell, and the Civil Rights Stories, as it was put together by 7 entities, the Aurora Human Relations Commission, the Dr. Martin Luther King Colorado Holiday Commission, Grand Design Inc., which I forgot to say earlier, I apologize.
That's all right. Okay.
A-Star Photography, Covenant Technology, and the Aurora NAACP Aurora branch. It is a project that is going to be put together after, this is the 6th series of oral history, and we hope to put a stage production possibly next year together where everyone who shared their stories, from Mr. Quincy, Mr. Vern, Ms. Barbara, and some of the other noted individuals, will have their stories told by actors.
That's right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to start with the baby on the panel. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. You're not nervous, are you?
Thank you. A little bit.
A little
actually,
bit, but
yes.
that's all right.
Thank you.
You had nerves. You know what happened with people who are fighting civil rights? They were nervous.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your involvement in civil rights.
Well, we are, my involvement, obviously, being black.
Is that what you are?
You're right.
Okay.
Or African American,
right.
whatever the politically correct term is. My involvement with civil rights is basically, with the story of Black Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
Black Wall Street was a situation where, that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. So what had actually happened was that African Americans had their own city. And with that city, they had like 300 businesses, so to speak. They had churches, they had grocery stores, they had banks, they had all different types of companies. African Americans basically was excluded at that time from any other portion of the government. They were excluded from every sense of the word of having freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just basically want individuals to understand that story. They don't teach that story in schools.
That's right.
It's amazing.
But we certainly had a foundation, and I'm proud to say my cousin who just recently died, not recently, died a couple of years ago. He was 95. He was a child when that happened in Tulsa.
Really?
Yes, so he's one of those that they have a plaque somewhere where they have all the names of the people. And I remember looking and seeing a note that said, "Let's make sure we honor them before they leave this and before they transition out of this world."
Mm-hmm.
And so he died about 3 years ago.
I'm sorry.
But so he was a young man when that happened. Vern, tell us a little bit about your involvement. And I know you're just a walking history book about a lot of things. And discuss with us your mission is civil rights. Your mission is with the Holiday Commission to putting on the state events that happen. But just tell me a little bit about what really, 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 really makes you tick.
To eliminate civil rights, to have human rights respected. Civil rights simply means that when somebody violates me, I can take them to court.
Mm-hmm.
What my mission would be, or what it is to have human rights to where everybody is respecting, loving, and getting along with one another because they all are living, breathing Homo sapiens, regardless of the race, color, and creed. I promise you we all put our pants on the same way. If we cut and the bleeding don't stop, we die.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite stories was Hurricane Andrew had hit on the Gulf, and these two families lived next to each other, one white, one black. And for generations, they hated one another, and they didn't know why. Hurricane Andrew came, and it mixed up everybody's belongings. once the dust settled or the wind ceased, these two families went out and found all their belongings mingled, and they realized that they had to rebuild. As they started talking with one another and rebuilding, they asked each other, "Why do I hate you?" Well, I don't know. Why do I hate you? As they continued their conversation, they started asking their senior members of their family. They said, "Because that's how it's always been. That's how it's always been. That's how it's always been." And they couldn't understand why, for 4 and 5 generations, we didn't have a rich relationship with one another. We had this bitter hatred. Those are the type of things we want to eliminate. That's what Dr. King was about, and that is what our goal and our drive is to eliminate civil rights and have human rights honored and respected.
Inalienable rights.
Yes, inalienable rights, exactly.
Miss Veronica O. White. Tell me about, I know you're the chair of the Human Relations Commission, and that's an awesome task, a never-ending task to keep it rolling and doing things.
It is.
So
It's a huge task simply because the ideal of human and civil rights as a commission is misunderstood. And people who may apply for that commission don't understand what that means. It's not about, and it's a unique animal. The commission's a very unique animal, and I believe that you have to have a compassion and a passion, dedication, and commitment to do the type of work that civil and human rights is about. I've been doing civil rights for all my life, human rights for all my life, and advocacy. And the work, as you know, because you've been doing it for others forever in the city of Aurora. And
across the nation.
It is not a task where everyone tells you thank you. I mean, many times you'll go home crying. It's like, why did I do that? But if I can put my head down at the end of the night on that pillow and say, I did what I was supposed to do, and someone's life is a little bit easier based on what my history is, what my family's done. My grandmother, as Miss Barbara knows, was a pioneer here in the state of Colorado, and she raised 8 kids by herself and did not have any excuse for none of them. You will do this. They are all successful individuals, and so is the family in the sense of the strife that we have and the history that is here in this state. You talked about Black Wall Street. We have a town here, Lincoln Hills. You know, but Lincoln Hills is a huge history, and it was like Aspen for blacks back in the 50s and 60s. Well, you know, where you had the actors or the musicians that may come to the 5 Points, well, they couldn't go to Aspen. They can go to Lincoln Hills. So, and my family has a lot of history with Lincoln Hills now, and we also have Deerfield. So those kinds of histories, if we pass those on, the human rights, I think people, our young people, will be able to really grasp a hold of what that means to them, because just reading in the book is not going to do anything anymore. They have to be able to feel it and digest it and have ownership. And yes, it's tough when people get on the commission. It's like, wow, what are we doing here?
When I was looking up some information and looking for violations of human rights, and I ran across the internment of the Japanese Americans, so that was a violation of human rights. There's some more things in violation of human rights in Russia, the imprisonment of various people who have gone to that country. The Tiananmen Square incident was a violation of human rights. And I need to tell you, when I went to China, the one place I wanted to go, and I did go, the Tiananmen Square, and I almost got arrested myself. If I had gotten arrested, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now, because my human rights might have been violated. But I wanted to stand in that spot where that young man stood with that great big tanker coming toward him and see if I could feel what he felt. Of course I couldn't, but I just imagined he had strength. He had he was a human being, and he could have been crushed like an insect. So therefore, and you say human rights is different, so those are the 3 I'd like to point out that were violations of human rights. I'm sure we have a lot more that we could talk about.
Look at Katrina.
Yes,
what right was
human rights,
yes.
that's right.
Well, right here in Colorado in 1900, they interned the Mexicans.
That's right.
Right here in Colorado.
Look at India,
That's right.
with women that are going on in India.
That's
They have this abortion thing where, if you're pregnant with a daughter, you know what I mean, somebody has to pay that dowry. You know what I mean? And those females are aborted. And then of course if they're not aborted and they're given birth to, then of course, they're just thrown in the trash basically.
And what makes that even worse is with the tragedy that just took place there, that a lot of these mothers, during the earthquake, lost their only child.
Right.
And now they're like, maybe we might want to rethink this.
Right.
I'd like to read a poem to you. One of our members of the Human Relations Commission, her granddaughter wrote this some years ago, and we just never used it, and I was looking for it, rumbling through some things, and found this and thought I'd read it, and I want to read it now so I don't get down to the end of the show and not have enough time. And her name is Randy Zenter. Her grandmother, Miss Catherine Zenter, was on the Human Relations Commission for many years, and she wrote, "I have something to say. Did the good doctor know that animosity would still live? Did the good doctor know that we still haven't tasted tolerance at the table of brotherhood? Did the good doctor know that we would still hate? Did the lovely Lady Liberty know that we would not take their hungry but send them back where they came from? Did the lovely Lady Liberty know that we would sacrifice liberty for the sense of security? Did she know we would be denying liberty to accused criminals? Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? Did the founding fathers of freedom know that there would still be oppressed nations? Did the founding fathers of freedom know that the United States would allow genocide 3 separate times? Did the founding fathers of freedom know that the rights of others are being stepped upon? Whatever happened to all men are created equal? Does the lovely Lady Liberty cry as these things come to pass? Does the good doctor wrench over in his grave at the thought of the United States allowing oppression? What happened to the dream? Do the founding fathers hang their heads in shame? What do they think of us now? Have we made them proud? Now, this is from a high school student.
Wow, that's amazing.
Such depth, such thoughtfulness.
It's absolutely amazing.
And I think that I've always thought that the youth of our coming behind us, because I grew up in the South, in the segregated South. I never saw a new school book. I used old books that white people had used in their schools. Our education system was flawed. So therefore, but it didn't keep me from being successful, didn't keep me from being smart or whatever. So, but when you think about these kinds of things, and you think as you grew older, you thought, well, with the young people coming up and you trying to erase those tapes of bigotry, et cetera, this world is going to get better and better and better. And I'm sure we have gotten better and better and better, but there are some places that we still have not been able to correct.
You said erase. Question I'm going to put for it. If we begin to, or if we continue to erase some of that history, we will never get past what has happened. We will have falsehood of what's happened. We need to keep those not in your face to make you, well, if it makes you upset, that's great, because there's some uneasiness that needs to be eradicated, and we can't move forward if we erase everything. We cannot erase all that history.
Well, see,
we have to remember it so we don't go backwards.
Well, we don't. We look at the Holocaust, and that culture of folks build on that to make sure that it doesn't ever happen again.
Well,
but yet we're told, get over it.
Right. Well, the thing is that we have 400 years of history there. You know what I mean? We can't erase 400 years of history. regardless of what we want to do. You know, you can go into a different part of the neighborhood and people look at you as if you don't belong there. But the fact is that you belong there just as much as they do. And for us, you know, we have to deal with our history regardless of what's going on. You know, we have to deal with the pain, we have to deal with the problems, we have to deal with that situation. And then once we move beyond that situation, we can't perpetuate hate with hate. You know, so just because one thing was done to us on one episode, we can't perpetuate that same hate to get beyond where we're at right now.
Understand what happens so we don't do it, not perpetuate,
Right.
not
That's
add
right.
seasoning to it, put
Right.
flavor
Right.
to it so we can go
Right.
forward.
Jump right in
We're
there.
better than that.
You know,
Yes,
Dr. King, Dr. King basically said what you just said, that hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do
Only
that,
love.
basically.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And I was speaking with a young lady not too long ago about the very thing we're talking about now. What's happened? Our parents and grandparents says it will be better for my child. So then it's like climbing stairs. You climb up that next step and you forget the step you just came up. Then that parent says it's going to be better for my child. And they climb up the step and they forget the step that they just came up. And what has happened, there was a time when in the black community, the church was royalty and family was king. And we would sit at the feet of our elders and we would listen to the stories of what happened, how they came up, how they were treated. And then for some reason, we decided not to share those stories with our children. We've grown complacent. We're driving our Mercedes Benz, we're living in Cherry Hills, we're living in Centennial, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what we have forgotten is that not only the struggle, but what we have forgotten, you know, in 2000, Black History theme was, is racism still alive? Not only is it still alive, it runs rapid. The only difference now is that
It's camouflage.
you better believe it is. And so,
a lot of backlash.
And I think about the banker in Seattle, and I've shared this story before, how this gentleman had a 6-digit income and AAA credit, and filed for a loan to purchase a house that he could have paid cash for and was turned down. And when they researched the reason, it was pure racism. On the other hand, there was a company right here in Colorado last year that a hotel decided to fire all of their Caucasian workers because they said Mexican workers work harder and better. See, there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination.
Exactly.
And those are the type of things that we have to eliminate. That is where respecting people's human rights, you know, and what they're able to bring to the table. And I like when we talk about the table, we know that's where Dr. King received his inspiration. But at the same time, when we're not represented at the table, you will
have
be.
No voice.
You bet. That's right, and that's why voting, registering to vote, and voting is so important. When we think about the struggle of the civil rights movement, when we think about what
can't erase what happened.
That's
Who
right.
died, what happened.
That's right. When we think about Bloody Sunday,
That's right.
They weren't going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to vote. They were going across it to register to vote. And we have people today who says, vote for what? How come my vote don't count? My argument is your vote counts. Regardless to which election it's in, you know, one vote. And I tell the funny story about a politician who was campaigning so hard on election day, he forgot to vote for himself and lost the election by one vote.
Well, see, but a lot of powers that be understand that votes count. We basically have to continue voting. We have to continue putting our word out there. We have to continue supporting all of our congressmen and so on and so forth. We have to support one another. The problem with the way we are today is that we don't support one another. You know what I mean? What we do is we look at other people, you know, in a different class,
Yes.
you know what I'm, social
Yes.
class, and if we're in a higher social class, we look down on them. Like you said, we're complacent. That is the problem with our society right now. We need to change that. And until we change that, we will continue perpetuating that slave mentality.
Exactly.
You know what I
There you
mean?
go.
And then everything that everybody fought for prior to, like Martin Luther King, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Rosa Parks, it's all going by the wayside.
Absolutely.
And the problem, well, there lies the problem actually, but even more so, what the biggest issue we have, I talk about how people talk about was Willie Lynch a real person?
Yes.
It don't matter if the person existed when the mentality exists. Then Willie Lynch is alive and well.
That's right.
And that is what we have to look out for.
That's
We
right.
also forgot about accountability.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to hold. We have to continue
That's
to
right.
hold
We can't
folks
keep
accountable.
we can't keep rewarding inadequate and well, you know what else, but we have to call it like it is.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't do it right, call it out.
I mean, some folks campaign out and we're all gung ho, and it's not, it's not what it was promised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hold
That's
them
right.
accountable.
Absolutely.
Out.
And we need to be accountable of ourselves. Our word needs to be our bond.
And that
If we say we're going to do something, if we're going to work together and let's do it.
Well, let thy nays be nays, right?
That's
and
right.
Yeas be yeas.
That's right. I'm going to ask you for one little short statement as we get ready to end this segment, and starting with the baby again.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bannister. I appreciate that. My statement is we basically have to learn how to work together. Until we get past that threshold of not working together, we're going to continue down that same path. We got to, the gang members, the rap stars, the people, let's just work together. Can we all just get along?
All right. All right, Ms. White.
That's a good one. I would say let Dr. Martin Luther King's dream be a catalyst for us to move forward. Let us not forget from whence we came, because if we forget where we came from, we have no idea where we're going. And that's huge and important. Let us remember our children. Let's love them and teach them their history. Teach them where they need to go. And I agree. Let's try to get along. If we can get along within ourselves, we can get along with each other.
I say learn to love and to forgive, and always, always educate. Exactly what you just, what the two you just said, what Dr. Bannister has always said, because education is the key. That is how slaves remained slaves for 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. That is what was designed to keep people from, or black people from escaping slavery, was the lack of education. Education is the key to success.
I want to say something that Steve Chavez said last night with from the Colorado Civil Rights Division. And he said, do not sit in the back of the bus.
That's right.
And that means when you hear an offensive joke, don't sit in the back of the bus. Stand up and say it's wrong.
Amen.
When you see something going wrong in the community, identify it, call it out. Because this is our community. We have to live here. And we need to protect our community. I visited Singapore, and it's a wonderful community. They don't even carry guns around. If someone drops a piece of paper on the ground, they're picking it up. So we should not let the things that are negative happen in our community without calling them out.
Absolutely.
Because if it affects you, it affects me.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, if we're all intricately tied together, and we know we are, what you do to me, you do to yourself, because we're all a part of each other. And we need to get back to working together. And we live in a great state, and Aurora is a wonderful city, very diverse, and we need to work together, all of our various cultures, and just intermingle and just be joyful and just appreciate each other. Not tolerate. I don't want to tolerate you.
Right.
I want to celebrate you.
Right.
Exactly.
I want you to be a part of me, and I want to be a part of you. So our theme this year was remember, celebrate, and act. Don't sit in the back of the bus. Act. Thank you for being with us.
watching Aurora 8, proud to be serving Aurora, Colorado, and all America City.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Water busters, what do you want? People over Aurora just wasting water. Water busters are on their way. Wait! Don't fill that tub full! Shower's hot.